On a moonless night in the year 59 AD, when the waters of the Bay of Baiae lay dark and silent beneath a sky that seemed to swallow every sound, a lavish Roman ship drifted slowly away from the shore, carrying one of the most powerful and feared women in the entire empire, a woman whose ambition had reshaped the destiny of Rome itself, and whose influence had once reached deeper into the imperial palace than even the emperor who now ruled it. Inside that vessel, surrounded by servants and guards who believed they were escorting their mistress safely home, sat Agrippina the Younger, the mother of the reigning emperor, the woman who had spent years manipulating alliances, eliminating rivals, and bending the machinery of Roman politics until the crown of the greatest empire on earth rested firmly upon the head of her son. Yet what no one aboard that ship knew was that every plank beneath their feet had been carefully prepared for destruction, every joint weakened by design, and every moment of the journey calculated by the very person who owed his throne, his power, and his life to the woman, sailing unknowingly toward her death. Because somewhere along the dark coastline, concealed within the shadows of imperial villas where torches flickered against marble columns, stood the emperor himself. Nero, watching the distant lights of the vessel disappear into the black horizon while waiting to learn whether the sea would accomplish the murder he had not dared to commit with his own hands. If the plan succeeded, Rome would awaken to the tragic news that the emperor's mother had perished in a terrible accident at sea, the empire mourning a noblewoman whose fate had been sealed by the unpredictable cruelty of nature. But if the sea refused to claim her, then history would witness a crime so shocking, so deeply unnatural in the eyes of Roman society, that even the hardened historians of the empire would later struggle to record it without disgust. For this was not merely a political assassination designed to eliminate a rival in the ruthless arena of imperial power, but the deliberate decision of a son to destroy the woman who had devoted her life to placing him on the throne of Rome. Before this night ends, a collapsing ship will turn a peaceful voyage into a floating grave. A desperate struggle through freezing black water will transform survival into defiance, and the emperor who once owed everything to his mother will be forced to confront a horrifying truth. The woman he tried to drown is still alive, and when she survives, he will order soldiers to do what the sea refused to do. The murder of rivals was common in ancient Rome, where power changed hands through poison, conspiracy, and blades hidden in the darkness of palace corridors. Yet the deliberate execution of one's own mother shattered a moral boundary that even the most ruthless rulers rarely crossed. This single act would forever stain the name of Nero and transform him in the eyes of history from a young emperor struggling to rule into one of the most infamous tyrants the ancient world ever produced. But the night Nero turned against his mother was not the beginning of the story. It was the final chapter in a long and dangerous game of ambition, manipulation, and fear that had begun years earlier inside the imperial palace, when a woman with extraordinary intelligence and relentless determination decided that her son would one day rule the Roman world. If you want to uncover more stories like this, stories where power destroys families and ambition turns blood ties into deadly rivalries, then subscribe to the channel and like this video, because what you're about to hear is one of the most chilling betrayals ever recorded in the history of the Roman Empire. Long before Nero wore the purple robes of an emperor, his mother Agrippina had already built a reputation as one of the most formidable and dangerous political figures in Rome. She was the great-granddaughter of the legendary Emperor Augustus, the sister of the volatile ruler Caligula, and a woman who had spent her entire life navigating the treacherous currents of Roman imperial politics, where survival depended not on loyalty or virtue, but on intelligence, ruthlessness, and the willingness to strike before being struck. After enduring exile during the chaotic reign of her brother Caligula and surviving the deadly intrigues that defined life inside the imperial court, Agrippina returned to Rome, carrying a single ambition so powerful that it would ultimately reshape the destiny of the empire. Her son would become emperor. At the time, the throne belonged to Claudius, a cautious and scholarly ruler who had unexpectedly risen to power after Caligula's assassination, and who governed the empire with a mixture of careful administration and quiet insecurity about the legitimacy of his rule. Claudius already had a biological son named Britannicus, who by tradition and bloodline stood as the natural heir to the imperial throne once his father's reign came to an end. But Agrippina was not a woman who believed in leaving the future to tradition or chance. Through calculated charm, political manipulation, and an almost unmatched ability to control the loyalties of powerful men within the Roman elite, she managed to marry Claudius and become empress, placing herself at the very center of imperial authority. Once inside the palace, she began quietly but relentlessly reshaping the future of Rome in ways that few people at the time fully understood. She persuaded Claudius to adopt her son Nero as his own, a decision that instantly elevated the boy above Britannicus in the line of succession, and stunned many members of the Roman Senate, who realized that the balance of power within the imperial family had suddenly shifted. The young Nero was given prestigious titles, honored before the public, and presented as the future ruler of Rome, while Britannicus remained in the background, watching his birthright slowly slip away. Many historians later believed that Claudius trusted Agrippina far more than he should have, blinded perhaps by affection or political convenience, as the ambitious empress tightened her influence over every corner of the palace. Then in the year 54 AD, when Claudius died suddenly after eating a meal that some ancient writers suspected had been poisoned, the carefully constructed plan that Agrippina had spent years building finally reached its climax. Before Rome could fully process the death of its emperor, the 17-year-old Nero was proclaimed ruler of the Roman Empire. Agrippina had achieved the impossible. Her son now controlled the most powerful state in the ancient world. At first, the new reign seemed promising, as Nero appeared youthful, generous, and eager to rule with wisdom, while relying on experienced advisors who helped guide his early decisions. Yet behind the scenes, another reality was taking shape inside the palace. Agrippina did not intend to surrender power simply because her son now sat on the throne she'd secured for him. Coins were minted showing both of their faces, an extraordinary symbol suggesting that the Roman Empire was being ruled by two figures instead of one. Foreign diplomats often found themselves speaking not only with the emperor, but also with his mother, who sat beside him with the calm confidence of someone who understood exactly how much influence she possessed. She attended meetings, advised policies, and sometimes listened from behind curtains, while Nero discussed state matters with senators and generals, ensuring that nothing important happened without her knowledge. For a time, it seemed as if Rome had entered an unusual era where imperial power was shared between a young emperor and the formidable woman who had created him. But the longer this arrangement continued, the more Nero began to feel the weight of his mother's shadow pressing down upon him. He was the emperor of Rome, yet everyone knew who had placed him there. Every decision he made seemed to carry the invisible imprint of Agrippina's influence. And as Nero grew older and more determined to rule independently, the bond between mother and son began to transform into something far more dangerous. Because the woman who had once been his greatest ally was slowly becoming the greatest threat to his power. As the months passed after Nero's rise to power, the fragile balance that had once allowed mother and son to share influence within the palace slowly began to collapse under the immense pressure of ambition, pride, and the growing realization that the Roman Empire could not be ruled by two people who both believed they deserved absolute authority. At first, the conflict remained hidden behind the polished rituals of imperial life, with formal dinners, ceremonial appearances, and public displays of family unity masking a deepening rivalry that everyone in the court could sense but few dared to speak about openly. Nero was no longer the nervous teenager who had relied entirely on the guidance of his mother and advisors, because as the years passed he began to see himself not as Agrippina's creation, but as the rightful ruler of Rome, whose authority should not be questioned by anyone, not even the woman who had engineered his ascent to the throne. Agrippina, however, did not share this new understanding of their relationship, and she continued to behave as though the empire she had helped build still belonged partly to her, offering instructions, intervening in political matters, and reminding those around her that without her intelligence and determination, Nero would never have become emperor in the first place. The tension between them grew sharper when Nero began surrounding himself with new companions who encouraged his independence and quietly advised him that the empire could never truly belong to him as long as his mother remained such a powerful presence in the background. Among those influences was a woman whose arrival at court would ignite a chain of events that pushed the conflict between mother and son toward a deadly conclusion. Her name was Poppaea Sabina, a noblewoman known for her beauty, intelligence, and remarkable ability to influence the men who fell under her spell. Poppaea quickly became one of Nero's closest confidants, and eventually his lover, and according to several ancient historians, she began encouraging the emperor to free himself from the suffocating control of his mother, warning him that Agrippina would never willingly surrender the power she had fought so hard to obtain. Agrippina recognized the threat immediately because she understood the dangerous role that a favored woman could play in the politics of an imperial court, where influence was often exercised through personal relationships rather than official titles. The rivalry between Agrippina and Poppaea turned the palace into a quiet battlefield of manipulation, suspicion, and whispered accusations, with each woman attempting to secure her position beside the emperor while undermining the other's authority. During this same period, another event shook the imperial family and removed the last obstacle that might have restrained Nero from acting against his mother. The young Britannicus, the biological son of Claudius, and the boy many Romans still believe should have inherited the throne, died suddenly during a banquet in the imperial palace. Witnesses described how Britannicus collapsed in front of the assembled guests after drinking from a cup of wine, his body convulsing violently before he died in full view of the imperial court. The official explanation blamed the death on epilepsy, yet few people in Rome believed such a convenient story, and whispers quickly spread that the young emperor had ordered the poisoning of his only legitimate rival for the throne. Whether Agrippina was involved in those rumors or not, Nero soon became convinced that his mother might use Britannicus's death as a weapon against him, revealing secrets or rallying political enemies who still remembered that she had once supported the boy's claim to power when it suited her ambitions. From that moment forward, Nero began to see his mother not simply as an inconvenient influence, but as a living threat to his survival. He gradually stripped her of privileges, dismissed her allies, and forced her to move away from the imperial palace into a residence where her ability to interfere in political affairs was greatly reduced. Yet even from a distance, Agrippina's presence continued to haunt the emperor's thoughts, because she possessed something more dangerous than soldiers or political offices. She possessed knowledge. She knew how Nero had become emperor. She knew the alliances that had been forged in secret. And she knew the fragile foundations upon which his authority had been built. If she ever chose to expose those truths publicly, the consequences could be catastrophic for a ruler who still depended on the loyalty of the Senate, the army, and the people of Rome. By the year 59 AD, Nero had reached a terrifying conclusion that would forever define his reputation in the pages of history. As long as Agrippina lived, he would never truly be secure on the throne, and so the emperor began planning a crime that even in a city accustomed to conspiracies and assassinations would be remembered as one of the most shocking betrayals ever committed by a ruler. Instead of sending soldiers to arrest or execute his mother directly, a decision that would certainly provoke outrage among the Roman elite, Nero chose a method that would disguise the murder as a tragic accident. The plan was elaborate, almost theatrical in its complexity, reflecting the emperor's desire to eliminate his mother while maintaining the appearance of innocence. He invited Agrippina to visit him at the luxurious coastal resort of Baiae, a place famous for its warm climate, elegant villas, and peaceful waters where Rome's most powerful citizens often traveled to relax far from the political tensions of the capital. During her stay, Nero treated her with warmth and affection, hosting banquets, sharing conversations, and giving every appearance that the bitterness between them had finally begun to fade. Agrippina, who had spent her life navigating deception and intrigue, may have suspected that something was wrong. Yet the emperor's careful performance convinced her that perhaps reconciliation was possible after years of growing hostility. When the evening ended, Nero insisted that his mother return home aboard a specially prepared ship that he claimed had been arranged for her comfort and safety during the journey. In reality, the vessel had been secretly engineered so that its roof and structural supports would collapse once it reached deeper water, sending Agrippina into the sea, where she would drown without leaving any evidence of deliberate murder. As the ship drifted away from the shore under the quiet glow of lanterns, reflecting on the dark water, Nero watched the vessel disappear into the night, believing that, by morning, the greatest problem of his reign would finally be solved. Hours later, the trap was triggered. The mechanism designed to destroy the ship suddenly gave way, causing the decorated canopy above the passengers to crash downward and the vessel itself to begin breaking apart amid chaos, screams, and shattered timber. Several people aboard were killed instantly as the structure collapsed around them, while others were thrown into the cold darkness of the sea. But Agrippina did not die. Bruised and shocked, yet still alive, she managed to escape the wreckage and swim toward the distant shoreline through water illuminated only by faint moonlight. By the time she reached land and was taken to safety by local fishermen, she understood exactly what had happened and who had arranged the disaster that nearly claimed her life. Her son had tried to kill her, and he had failed. When news reached Nero that Agrippina had survived the shipwreck and was recovering at her villa, the emperor reportedly fell into a state of panic so intense that the entire palace was thrown into confusion. The carefully planned accident had not only failed to eliminate his mother, but had also created a far more dangerous situation in which she now possessed undeniable proof that the emperor had attempted to murder her. For a brief moment, Nero considered whether he might still salvage the situation by pretending the disaster had been genuine, but he quickly realized that Agrippina was far too intelligent to remain silent about such an obvious betrayal.